Hello and welcome to Public Interest Podcast with your host, Jordan Cooper, where we interview politicians, activists, advocates, and anyone who is interested in making the world a better place. We are here today with former Mayor of Rockville in Montgomery County, Maryland, Stephen Van Grack. How are you doing today, Steve?
Good, Jordan. Thank you. Glad to be here and looking forward to talking with you.
Great. So I'd like to start off the conversation by asking you, what have you done in your life or what are you currently doing to advance the public interest?
Wow. There's an awful lot to answer with that. In terms of what have I done, I've spent an awful lot of time in public service with the city of Rockville, bringing major changes to the city.
What are some of those changes? What were you doing those changes when you were mayor, or what?
Well, most of them, yeah. Obviously, when I was mayor, we did things such as we introduced some of the very early limitations on smoking cigarettes in restaurants.
Okay.
We introduced and I appointed the first lesbian gay to the Board of Commission in the city of Rockville. I appointed the first African American to the Board of Appeals, one of the largest, one of the more important boards in the city. And we changed the voting laws dramatically in the city of Rockville. Rockville used to have a system where you had to register separately in the city of Rockville to vote. We said that was outdated, that was too restrictive, and changed the laws dramatically so that if you're registered in Montgomery County, Maryland, you'd be registered to vote in the city of Rockville.
So I'm hearing some public health initiatives, some civil rights initiatives from both the perspective of demographics and also civic engagement in terms of voting. And then you ended up running for elected office as mayor. You did some of these things as mayor. Why do all these things? Why run for mayor? Why try to push these initiatives? There's, a lot of other people advancing a lot of other stuff. Why is it? What drives you? What has been your motivation?
These were all on the forefront. These were bringing about changes. Rockville was I'm not sure it's a slight overstatement, antiquated city. They were old school. And these were changes that were just the right things to do. It just made sense. We changed the voting laws. We changed the city charter. We did things that just made sense, in my opinion, to do the right things. So,
and why was it
there's one other thing I have to tell you that was very significant, although controversial. In 1987, I believe, the Surgeon General issued the first report on AIDS. And prior to that time, AIDS was sort of undercover. It was nearly not as well exposed. We were the first city in the country to send a copy of the Surgeon General's report to every member of the city, every mailing address in the city, without charge. We sent that. And that was also still controversial. I mean, the AIDS report was new and had some hard language in it, but that was along the same lines. We just did things that we thought were right, and we did them.
What drove how did you know that it was right? What's driving you to do the right thing? How do you even know if something's right? I mean, obviously, no one had done it before you. So what prevented them from doing it that you were able to overcome so that you could do it?
Those are tough questions. I mean, why do you do the things that you do? You do them because they're the right things to do. They just make sense. Those were changes that I thought, and certainly had to have enough support on the council to bring about those changes. So those were the kinds of things that made sense.
Was there any what were some of the tangible benefits of distributing all the AIDS, the Surgeon General reports on AIDS?
That's a very interesting question, because the Surgeon General's report on AIDS had some strong language in it. The language used words such as oral intercourse, vaginal intercourse, and anal intercourse. Those were words in the report, and we decided not to change one word of the report when we sent it out. So on one hand, there was a large contingent of people who said, wow, it's so great that you went and did this and exposed the people of the city to AIDS. And then there were a few people who
exposed them exactly to AIDS.
Well, exposed them to information about AIDS.
Yeah, right.
Exposed them to learning about AIDS. Very,
Right.
very true. And then there were some people who said, you're mailing pornographic literature to my home. These words should not be in my home.
Interesting.
So you take, as a public officer, as I viewed it, you take positions that you think are right. Sometimes people agree and sometimes they don't.
Interesting. So you're trying to do what you think is right, which is, reduce bias against the homosexual population, try to promote tolerance, try to promote public health awareness, and you think you're doing the right thing. And then there's just kind of an unexpected backlash. There's almost no matter what you do, you're going to do something wrong and step on somebody's feet. So is that your experience?
Well, that comes with public service. You can't please all the people all the time. That's what happens. I will also take this into a kind of a slight transition in that in 1994 I ran for Congress. And when I ran for Congress, I limited my campaign expenditures to $10,000. When I had run for mayor, the times that I had run, I had raised more money than ever before or since. So I was a prolific fundraiser.
More than $10,000.
A lot more than $10,000, and when I ran for Congress, I decided to limit my campaign contributions to $10,000, hoping that the press would grab the issue and say, too much money in campaigns, this is the candidate.
Did they grab it?
They didn't grab it. There's reference to it, but it didn't become a big issue. The comment of the press was, well, all these people are raising all these money, that's a bigger press issue. And I lost. I won the primary. I had a very contested primary, and I became the Democratic nominee, but the Republican, Connie Morella, great lady, had hundreds of thousands of dollars when she first began the campaign,
right,
and raised more during the course of the campaign.
Now, you also have to, within the context of that race, you were considered to be the sacrificial lamb.
No question.
For the Democratic Party. Somebody had to run. They knew that the Democrat wouldn't win.
That's right.
So they asked you to do a service to the party, and maybe you limited losses to the party knowing that you weren't going to beat a very popular moderate incumbent.
Well, that's true. I did get a lot of recognition as a very viable opponent to Connie Morella, and in those days, you may or may not remember, they had the contract with America, Newt Gingrich.
Right.
And Connie supported that, which placed her on the conservative side.
Right.
But it certainly didn't change enough people in Montgomery County to vote for me in the general election.
So why did you run as a sacrificial lamb? Why do you continue to both serve the Democratic Party, which in your perspective, in your opinion, advances the public interest, and then more directly as a member of the Democratic Party, as an elected official, why do you keep, taking all of these hits? There's so many easier ways. You're in law practice now, is that correct?
Right, right.
And, in your law practice right now, do you make more or less money than when you're in politics? Do you spend more or less time with your family? And do you have more or less fewer people actually taking cracks at you than when you were in elected office?
Well, that's a whole series of questions, Jordan. Let's go back to perhaps the first part of that, which is, why do you do what you do? Why did I run in the campaign? And there are all sorts of reasons why. I had an opportunity in a selfish way to interact with some of the great leaders of our country, and to have interaction with them was exceptional. I had wonderful conversations with then President Clinton and the First Lady and not all, but a great many leaders from there on down, and the opportunity from a selfish perspective to interact with these people was very rewarding.
So it's exciting. It's intrinsically rewarding just to be part of the process.
Absolutely, but there was more. There were positions that I took on issues. I was one of the early supporters of term limits. In those days, term limits were not very popular. Well, my logic, it certainly didn't succeed. My logic was we have term limits on our president, and here in Maryland we have term limits on our governor. So if our top elected officials have term limits, why shouldn't people of Congress? And It's not just one issue, one of many issues that I decided to come out and speak out on.
It's a very salient issue for our listeners at this time in Montgomery County, Maryland,
Right.
because, of course, in 33 days we have an election in which, in Montgomery County, Maryland, term limits for the Montgomery County Council will be on the ballot as a charter referendum.
Right.
And it's something that Robin Ficker has brought to Montgomery County 2 times previously. It's been defeated both times. Tell me why you think it's a good idea to impose term limits on the county council, and frankly, with the U.S. constitutional amendment on the president, and then in the Maryland Constitution on the Maryland governor.
Well, you can look at it from a local Montgomery County level or from a national level. Incumbency is an unfair advantage to returning to public office. In our Congress, we return well over 90% of our congressional candidates every single time. And that goes on.
So what does that say about the quality of the candidates, and what does that say about the electorate?
The people do not like Congress. They like their individual congressional representative. There's something wrong with the fact that somebody who can run 10, 15, 20, 30 years, that's the only name that they know. They provide constituent service, but people hate Congress, not dislike, they hate what Congress does today, and Congress keeps going. But Montgomery County, the same thing. We have many members of the county council who have served 12, 16, and more years. And so to run against these incumbents, it's an overwhelming position. Well, maybe not impossible. How about improbable to succeed? And you have to raise a ton of money. So the value of incumbency is overwhelming and too difficult to overcome. And I think on a local level or on a national level, we shouldn't allow these people to become career politicians.
So how do you assess what's in the public interest? Why would you say, for instance, if I were to have a brain surgeon operate on a loved one for a brain tumor, I'd rather have somebody who'd been a professional career brain surgeon, neurosurgeon, who's been doing it for 30 years, and somebody fresh out of residency. Why don't you want a professional politician making decisions about policy that, in theory, they have gained expertise about through the course of their public service?
Because their positions on the political issues really don't come to the forefront. The fact that they've served is all that people rely, not all, but is a great portion of why people vote for them again. Oh, I know this person. He provided this constituent service. But their vote on the issues, people cannot stand the way Congress votes on the issues today, and the people are upset with votes even in the county government. Montgomery County is a little different. We have a wonderful government here. We have a great county council. We have a great county executive. But even if our county executive has now served 3 terms, if he wanted to serve a 4th term, he wins. Doesn't matter who would run against him. So he could serve for 16 years and then a 5th term, 20 years. And so that same person coming in does not change the policies. They stay the way they are.
And are the policies... Well, let's move on to what does it say about the electorate that they overwhelmingly vote in incumbents, yet to some extent don't approve of the entire body? Does it mean that we're slowly going to becoming a nation, 2 separate, one single party nations? Or what does it say about the electorate that they keep voting in the same people? Should they change? Are they not making informed decisions with their vote? What does it say about the electorate that they keep voting in the same incumbents time and again?
Well, it says it's not working because Congress has been an abysmal failure. Part of it could be term limits. Part of it could be money, because in order to succeed in Congress today, you have to raise a lot of money. And if you are an incumbent, once you first are elected, you can raise an awful lot of money, and they start raising money right away as soon as they're elected so that they can outspend somebody else. And to outspend them takes not just a lot of money, an enormous amount of time to raise money if you're not wealthy.
Let's talk about some of the things that you actually spend that money on. What are some of the things that a politician would spend those campaign funds on?
Well, everything. Well, the most important thing is television time.
On every race or just a certain type of race?
Well, it certainly depends. The major race is television time, but
Like federal races or
federal races
gubernatorial?
without question. But it's people who work in your campaign. Are they paid? Are they volunteers?
Okay, so campaign staff.
Campaign staff, campaign costs, mailings, phone banks, events. It's staggering. One of the main problems in politics today is that so many candidates spend so much time raising money to run for office when they should be spending their time figuring out ways to improve our nation.
So they should be spending more time learning how to advance the public interest, and are prevented from doing so because they're trying to fundraise to get back in office, and the fundraising helps them get back in office by allowing them to conduct voter outreach. So they're not able to reach out directly to the voters to ascertain what the voters perceive as in the public interest because they're spending money to reach out to voters in impersonal ways later so that they can get elected. That's kind of a circuitous, negative, self-fulfilling prophecy. What's going on there?
Well, there's too much money involved in politics. In fact, today, certainly locally it's true, and I believe it's true nationally, the only people who can mount viable campaigns to incumbents are the wealthy, or the people who raise a lot of money. Here in Maryland, we have a congressman from one of our districts who spent a fortune to get elected the first 2 times, and he's going to do it again. We had a candidate run here in the 8th Congressional District who spent more money, I'm told, than any candidate in America in a primary election, and he lost. These are the only people who can mount the challenges. Something's not right. Our system was not designed to be that way.
What kind of solutions, both policy solutions and any other kind of solutions, could we have to address the tainted influence of money in politics? For instance, what do you think about, so for instance, there's campaign finance laws that govern how much, a maximum amount of contribution that any individual can make to a candidate, but do not apply to the candidate himself.
Right.
Would you think it would be worthwhile to have a law that limits the amount of money anyone can use to self-fund their own campaign?
Absolutely. The whole concept, campaign financial reform, is so badly needed in this country. It is just, we are allowing the wealthy to have far too great an influence over what happens in our policy, and we can see it in our presidential campaign too.
What about limiting the number of limiting who can contribute to the campaign to those whom the candidate seeks to represent in elected office?
Or you can limit the amount of money they can spend based upon like so much per candidate or so much per voter in your district. Or you can spend.
You have 120,000 voters. You can't spend more than $120,000.
Precisely. You should limit all expenditures. Why should it be unlimited? Why should people be spending millions of dollars?
Because that money could be used in other ways in society to advance the public interest.
Well, that's one way it could be used, but certainly it's going to stop this buying of campaigns.
And talk to me about buying of campaigns. What does that mean?
Well,
who's contributing to these campaigns?
Well, there are very wealthy people who can afford to spend millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars of their money to influence the results of campaigns. And the statistics have shown...
But votes still come from individuals.
Right.
So somehow this money is being used to purchase those items that you already mentioned as political expenditures, and those items are quite successful in convincing voters to vote one way or another.
Yeah, always been the case.
So is there any kind of antidote to inoculate regular voters from the influence of political expenditures?
Well, there are an awful lot, and certain limits on campaign contributions. When I ran, this is an interesting story, when I first ran for mayor of Rockville, there were no limits on the amount of money a candidate could receive in their election. And when I ran, I limited, self-imposed, any contribution to $1,000. And we then, when I became mayor and won, limited to $1,000. So from that time to the present, no person can contribute more than $1,000 to any campaign for an elected official in the city of Rockville. What a great concept. I mean, you're not going to get that much money with that restriction to dramatically change the outcome in an election.
Now, if you were to pass a law that limits campaign contribution, I mean, what does Citizens United, the Supreme Court case governing campaign finance across the nation that allows super PACs to exist, and what is that case? What are the implications of that case on local campaign finance law?
Well, that's in my opinion, a terrible court decision, because they said freedom of speech applies to campaign financial contributions, and I don't know that it does. I disagree. But what that does, it allows people with big money to give it to some organization, no matter how they set it up, but allows people to give hundreds of millions of dollars to an organization that will influence the campaigns. It shouldn't be. You shouldn't allow that. Strict campaign laws would make everybody feel better about Congress.
Right. Okay. So we're coming to the top of this 20 minutes.
Yeah.
So I'd like to just kind of wrap it up by returning the subject a little bit to Stephen Van Grack, former mayor of the city of Rockville. You're very clearly passionate about all of these different issues about good governance. You've done an enormous amount of work to advance the public interest through public health and through civil rights. What keeps you going? What is it that really has driven you to right wrongs, to address fairness, and to advance the public interest throughout your life and your many careers?
Well, as I try, it's not just as an elected official that I've done that. I do it as a lawyer. I've done more pro bono work for causes and people and individuals and organizations that I believe in. It's really simply just doing what you believe is the right thing to do. And it doesn't much matter. I mean, in honesty, I keep all these newspaper clips of all these good things that I've done, but it doesn't really matter. People don't read them. They're reminders for me. I just know that even if people don't agree, even if I'm not successful, even if it doesn't work, and I may not always be right, I think I've done the right thing. And that's really what it's all about. There are not enough people who do that, or they do it but they think that that's what will get them elected, or that's what will advance their cause. I sort of think it's sort of, you do what's right because you think it's the right thing to do.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been another episode, the 5th episode of Public Interest Podcast, with your host, Jordan Cooper, where we interview politicians, activists, and advocates on issues that on how they have improved and advanced the public interest. You heard it straight from the mouth of Stephen Van Grack. It is most worthwhile in life to do what you think is right to improve society, and it's intrinsically rewarding, and it's a lifelong journey of public service. And of course, there are many ways, both in the private sector and through the public sector, through elected office, to advance the public interest, and you needn't be involved as an elected official in order to advance the public interest. Thank you so much, Steve, and we'll be with you next time, and look forward to the next episode. Thanks. Bye.